Alrighty, welcome back to another devlog. This is number 50. 2 more weeks to make it 1 whole year since I started breaking ground on this project. So, here is the total scope of the first level so far. I would probably say this is around 70% there. There's still a bit more to do after this, but I'll go ahead and walk you through what I've done this week. So on Monday, go ahead and get in here. Have to go ahead and hide everybody. F1 basement and F3. So look here. This is the second floor, scene 3, I believe, complete its entire scope. So on Monday, I finished up the actual work of this sector here. Just polished up a few things, added some props and whatnot. Just kind of finished it off. Some spotlights. Just finalized it. Not too much time to finish that up. Then I turned to this last sector here. If we look at the map, we have floor 2. So it's pretty much just this last area here, this last connecting hallway that connects everything back to the starting sector. So same deal as before, marked it out, same process, creatively constructed. For this little room, I decided to do a little bit of randomization height. This landed here, and I have a process now to kind of randomize the tiles, but creatively like iron out which tiles should be on which level and whatnot. So this little area here naturally was the center, so you have to come up here and come down. And pretty much the rest of the hallway just straightforward. Same process, just decorating and polishing until everything felt right. And that was pretty much it for the sector. So that was Monday. I got the sector complete, and then on Tuesday I was getting started on the next scene. So we have here, go to open this up. So brand new scene. The last scene's in the bag. Floor 2's in the bag. And so on Tuesday and Wednesday, I focused on this very first portion here. Look at the layout. We have this here. So this first sector is just a bunch of hallways and stuff. So we'll do just this section here. So more hallways, kind of straightforward. I went and created a new base prefab wall tile, just kind of change things up. Most of the same floor tiles, and just like the previous sectors, my process of laying out the walls and fine-tuning and then creatively adding props and things to it. I went for a more design of like not just random walls like one then another random wall, but more consistently like, if there's there might be a section of walls that are all the same, so it's just not like one random wall after the other, but more like a whole section of the same wall, just to kind of be a little bit more consistent and not so, because a random wall and a random wall, it kind of throws you off a little bit. It kind of feels like it's just thrown together, but I don't know. I think it's a little bit more unified this way. But yeah, this hallway, this this doorway, and then this door over here. You look at the design. It opens up into a new room. So there's two main rooms in this new scene. And I'm working on this one. I had to, before I got started in construction, I went through this plan and actually validated the actual player path that I designed to like travel through, which sections, and I had to fine tune a couple things, but it's mostly valid. Validated the path that it actually makes sense before I start to build it. So Tuesday, Wednesday was able to complete this first hallway, and then okay, so on Thursday and Friday, I I began work on this next room here because it made sense to do this room first for the way I designed the player to actually travel through the level. So I I was working on this like I usually do, and I laid out the floor tiles to be of random height as usual, and this is kind of how they ended up landing for the most part. If they're all sort of random, so I had to even out some of it to make cohesive sections. It can't just be like this big janky random area, but you have these certain levels that are all the same level, but it adds verticality, just like the previous level, without all the smaller tiles being all over the place. So when I was making the last scene, I was running into this problem of I would lay out a bunch of these tiles, but the way that G-spawn works, it'll give you the actual tile at the height, but then it'll actually spawn a whole bunch of redundant tiles underneath it. And that's fine if you have a small area. You can just go and manually select each one of them and clean them up, just so you get like the topmost tile, and you can clean up all the prefabs underneath that you're not going to use. That just chews up render time unnecessarily. But the problem with this, laying out all these random tiles over this large area, that means just a ton more to clean up, right? So there had to be an easier way. Otherwise, I'd be sitting here spending lots of time selecting, cleaning up all the unnecessarily spawned tiles underneath the map and stuff. Just a lot of cleanup work. That's not very good. So I went and wrote a script to do what you can do. You can select a tile, and it'll pretty much project and detect any tiles of the same sort underneath it, and you can hit a button and it would go delete that, and it would clean it up without having to select each individual one. So a little script like that saves you time, but even that wasn't good enough. So I could do this manually one by one instead of selecting each one underneath it and deleting one by one. But what I wanted to do was it's just to somehow to grab every single floor tile, and detect which one's the topmost tile and pretty much run this algorithm. So it'll go through all your floor tiles and clean them up in one go, and that took a little bit of engineering work to do, but overall it's worth it, and that'll save me time. So the next time I do a big room with random height tiles, I won't have to go in and spend time manually deleting everything. I can just run a script that'll do all the heavy lifting for me. So things like that you want to spend the time to make functions for. So, and I'm making pretty good use out of these little scripts that I've got. Things like changing the world position, and a lot of times, changing the game object parent. Unity doesn't really provide easy ways, but there's a lot of times where I I have to select something and then I have to move it into the hierarchy, you know. But these lists get huge with a bunch of objects. So it's like if you select one down here and then you have to hold the left mouse and just slowly scroll through a huge list until you finally get to the one you want. Here I can just select what I want, drag it down here, and then select the other thing and click one button and it'll parent that object. Or I can select a whole bunch of them and parent, and that makes moving around objects a breeze. You don't have to mess around too much. So, getting a lot of use out of those. So Thursday, Friday, you know, it's really a marathon doing this whole thing. Like at the end of the week, end of Friday, I got all the way down to a certain level of polish, all the way to here. I still have to do this back room here, work this a little bit, but it's mostly there. It's just a lot of work to really fine tune everything, place everything, all the rails, you know, all the positions for everything, and just make sure it meets that first level of polish before I start to put in, you know, random props and stuff. It's just to make sure everything's, you know, ironed out. And so definitely like, and also the confiners. This room was a bit tricky to get the confiners right, especially with like the wall fade in and fade outs of this particular section. It was a bit of a challenge. I had some new wall prefabs just to kind of throw things up. It's an indoor environment, but it actually the side walls look pretty good instead of just your standard hallway walls and such. So yeah, getting around this corner, setting up the confiners right so the camera transitions correctly. You know, it's kind of, you know, make sure that the camera doesn't clip through the walls, or if it does, that there's, you know, certain camera fade, camera dither shaders set up in order to facilitate that. Just a bunch of stuff. So by the time I was trying to do my 8 hours on Thursday, but I was just so shot from all the monotony and just the repetitive nature of this work. But I made it up on Friday, and I got my full 40 hours this week. But that's how far I've got. At the very end of the day, it took me 2 minutes, but one of the problems I had when I'm like setting up new walls, I'm doing testing. Every once in a while, run over a new floor prefab or a wall prefab that I haven't set up for a particular collider layer, and it'll just run right through the wall and it'll fall through the ground, and now I can't control my player anymore. It's kind of annoying because I'd have to stop the app and restart it every time that happened. And after enough times, it's just like let's just write a little function, take you 2 minutes. You know, if that happens, you can just hit this reset position button. It pretty much every 100 frames it'll record the player's position, and if you happen to go off the world, you can hit the reset position and it'll reset you back to where you were. I guess there's an issue with that. If you let it fall too long and you try to reset, it'll still be, maybe that doesn't work. Maybe that doesn't work as well as I thought. Maybe I should up the frame tick count just to think about it, but whatever. So yeah, more work for this week. Just another week, gotten more level construction done, more sections in the bag, and each week I'm getting closer and closer. This is another big chunk. So I'll finish up this room next week, no problem, with the final construction and props and details on all of that. And then the challenge, or the next area is this room here. It's still a large room, but maybe not as large as this room, but still a lot of area to cover, and that should finish up the scene. So I could probably get this next scene done next week for sure, and move on to some of the few last scenes in this level. You know, it's actually, when I started, it was like, oh, it's going to take so long to build this level. But you just keep going, and each week you add a big chunk to it. This next scene is the last larger scene. This is almost the same size as what I've done here for this scene. This is of a comparable size, so probably, you know, I might make it 20-30% through this next scene next week. But the good news is after that, that's the last big large scene. There's only one more scene after that, which is kind of the size of the first basement. But you know, each week I'm getting closer and closer. The goal, the reality is almost there. I've almost I've almost done it. I've almost created my you know, from this prototype here, this tile, actually constructed it to a certain degree quality in Unity in a 3D environment, and it's you know, it's been no mean feat to do this, you know. So that would be a huge milestone, getting that first core level down. Even though it might be, I still haven't judged how much in-game content time it would be, but it's still a significant portion, you know, and it'll give me a good gauge to judge, you know, how much more level construction I'd have to do for the entire game, considering how long it takes to progress through the entire level, given the gameplay. So, that is pretty much all all there is to discuss today. What I'll do is just open up these again. And yeah, you can see pretty much everything that's been. Go ahead and yeah, so it's pretty much coming along how it should. Just a lot here, but it just shows what you can do by actually doing the work, you know. You can see how much you can get accomplished if you stick to it and just keep grinding away and keep working, you know. But enough said. I'll wrap it up here, and we'll see you next week.